Awesome, so I'll just do a quick hello. I'm Michelle McNiff, the account executive. I've been at New Relic about 2 years, and we've been working with Autodesk specific teams for about 4.5 years. And so the past year, we've been working very closely with the cloud infrastructure team and the BIM teams to understand how New Relic is being used, and really to discuss also how can we be a part of, or how can we help with there's a lot of standardization and metrics and a lot of processes that are being rolled out across Autodesk. So we've been just working to identify how do we help, how do we give best practices and provide training. So a lot of this is wondering, we want to make sure to give a lot of training over the next day or so, but also to get your feedback on where we can provide more help, support, and honestly, there's no dumb questions. So Joe's here to answer all of them.
Cool. Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, so I mean, today is our basic, just foundational training for APM and New Relic in general. So, if you've never used New Relic, you're not familiar with what we do, and you want, to understand how to actually use APM and things like that, that's what today is for. So, how many of you guys have used New Relic? Just raise your hand. It's like half? Over half? Okay. So maybe some of this is a little bit repetitive for you guys. We can go through some of the basic stuff pretty quickly. And yeah. So Michelle is like the account executive. My role is what's called software analytics architect. So I am the technical point person for all of Autodesk. And so I have like a team of people working with me. Maybe some of you have talked to Michael Job or my other colleague Josh Reinhardt on the phone. Those are my team members. No, none of those guys. All right. It's okay. I think I've met a lot of you over calls. Neve, Oded, we've been working together for a while. Do we have the folks from Sheffield and are you Steven? All right, cool. Nice to meet you guys. Thanks for coming. The training assumes that you guys have an account. So that's a user account in New Relic. Does everyone who does not have a user account? Anybody? 1, 2, 3. Okay. So if you guys can ping in Slack, I think Oded said his team will take care of putting your user account in. Once you get a user account provision, the system will send you an email and it will say, please set up your password, and then you'll be able to access the training account. We'll be mainly in the BIM 360 production account today for the training. I think most of you should have access to that if you have an account, right? Because most of them engineering is here. Awesome. Welcome. Morning.
Morning.
So I was just explaining, if you don't have an account, you can go click in the Slack channel to get a user account provision. There'll be labs, so you actually want to get in your laptop and get into New Relic. So if you don't have access to New Relic in the W360 account, you need a provision your account. Okay, cool. So first off, I've done these sorts of workshops all over the world. So my role is sort of like technical enablement from a pre-sales perspective. I actually used to be an engineer. I used to be a systems engineer. I used to work for a financial company that had a lot of monitoring tools, and I used New Relic there a lot. And I kind of converted over 3 years ago to this side of the house. This is me actually in Tokyo last year. So I was actually giving, this is at the AWS Summit, which we'll be back. We'll actually be at this one in Tel Aviv. That's coming up in March. And then we'll meet up on Wednesday too. We'll be talking here. So this is really awesome for me, obviously, to fly around the world, do training, do workshops like this. So it's not really possible without cool customers like Autodesk and cool sponsors like Oded. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you to all of you. I want to get your feedback on the training. So if we're not advanced enough, or you guys have specific things you want me to dig into after we do like the first session here today. Tomorrow is more advanced topics, so we can dive into specific products like browser, insights, the analytics engine that powers New Relic, specific use cases, and then we're going to also have office hours Wednesday afternoon. That's just completely free-form Q&A. I've used every product. I've helped customers at any scale roll them out, so I can probably answer most of your questions. So I'm an asset for you to help you guys be successful, so please take advantage of me one here. Here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday afternoon, and then Wednesday evening at the AWS meetup. Cool. So first things first, we're going to go through a lot of like just basic level set of New Relic. So sort of our history, where we've come as a company, and then architecture, things like that. After this, we're going to go through, actually, just really quickly, we're going to go through the basic concepts of APM. We're actually going to do a lab where we use New Relic to troubleshoot an application performance issue in one of your guys' applications. The training is customized for BIM, for Autodesk. And then we're also going to configure key transactions and understand how and when, why the setup works. And then from there, we can move on to like level set basic understanding of insights and things like that, if we have time. And that'll be day one. Tomorrow, we plan to cover more customer experience products, so more about browser. Have you guys implemented mobile? I think you guys have, right? Someone has deployed it somewhere, the mobile agent.
All the mobile has had it deployed, it's no longer active actually.
Okay, so we can cover that. There's like a pretty long set of features we released with mobile that are very, very, very useful. And those are my ideas for day two. But again, the feedback will make day two more useful for you. Cool. So where have we been as a company? So New Relic was founded by a man by the name of Lou Cerny. I don't know if you guys know of a product called CA Interscope or Wiley. It's part of the CA portfolio of monitoring tools. They have like infrastructure stuff as well. That tool is actually created by our CEO, Lou. And it was, Java monitoring for application performance. It did .NET as well. It was pretty chunky, on-premise. You guys know the monitoring tools where you need to install 30 servers and manage the footprint, back up the logs, stand up the database server in order to get it running. That's what Wiley was. It was built in like early 90s, late 90s, early 2000s. That tool is pretty difficult to use to get actually metrics out of it. So he actually, when he sold the company, he took some time off, and right around the time that the iPhone came out, you guys know how the iPhone was the first phone that you could unlock it and activate it right on your laptop through iTunes. Like most phones, you had to go into a carrier. You guys remember a time before iPhones when you had to like actually have someone like log into the computer and activate your phone for you with the carrier? So he was sitting in a cafe in Italy, so the story goes, and he thought that he should take that concept and apply it to APM tools that we had created successfully in the past. So that's where we entered with APM. In 2007, New Relic is founded, and we started with just straight up Rails performance monitoring. So if you guys notice in New Relic, when you log in, the URL is rpm.newrelic.com, and that stands for Rails Performance Monitor.newrelic.com. That was just the founding principle. The idea is that you have an agent, you drop it in, and the agent automatically monitors the app, the code you write, things like that. BIM has quite a bit of Ruby running, so you guys are familiar with that agent. It's probably our most deeply featured agent. You notice if you look at the charts, they have the most layers and things like that. From there, we went to Java, .NET, obviously the more popular business languages, and then some fun stuff, so like Python, PHP. We launched servers, which is a free complement to APM, allowing you to monitor some of your hosts in your environment alongside your apps. And then plugins were launched. Plugins are like a way to extend servers, do things like monitor load balancers. I don't think you guys use any of those. They're quite old at this point, and as you've seen, we've matured quite a bit. So after that point, we started getting into like things like customer experience monitoring, mobile. Mobile is an SDK, drop it in your mobile app, and it instruments the code in the mobile app when you compile the app. Android and iOS. Then browser was launched, so more customer experience focus, getting into things like how fast are my pages loading, just doing basic navigation timings. That browser product has matured quite a bit, so it's come from just like show me the page views to show me the page views, Ajax timings, route changes, automatically instruments single page application frameworks, so like Angular and React. And then it will even associate things like route changes to their associated Ajax calls, how fast it is plugged in. We acquired a few people along the way too, so Duxboard is an acquisition out of Barcelona. Any familiar with Duxboard prior to the development? So Duxboard is now the infrastructure integrations. So those are the Hotwatch integrations. Duxboard was a sort of like go and fetch data, put it in a dashboard from anywhere tool. That team is folded into infrastructure as part of our platform. We'll get to that too. So around 2015 is when I started migrating to New Relic as a user and a power user. And that's around the time we launched what was called Project Rubicon. So Project Rubicon was a way to look at business metrics coming out of your application. And that became now the New Relic Insights product. So Insights is a real-time event feed of all the data we collect from all the products. You can do things like where APM will show you surface level performance metrics, say how fast are all the transactions in an app. Insights would let you do things like split the performance metrics by any arbitrary attribute. And that could be something like country of origin for a given request, or it could be something business-centric like user ID. And so if you use Insights, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing anything specific with it. It actually just piggybacks off the other products. So I'll show you what that looks like too. Synthetics is a new introduction a couple years back, around the time we acquired another tool. The Synthetics product, you guys are familiar with synthetic monitoring, I'm sure. Ping any URL. We do up to like 5,000 pings per account, 50 monitors times the number of locations for free. You guys use Pro Synthetics as well. So that allows you to do script monitors, do API tests, validate that the schemas come back correctly, there's no errors in the response codes, things like that. And you can run, I think, 20 different global points of presence now. So from a couple locations, as well as private locations. Private locations would be something you deploy behind your own firewall or an AWS AMI or something like that. So if there's a location, we then support you use private locations. Then the latest entry is infrastructure. So I think you guys have deployed infrastructure. Does anybody, have any of you guys used it at all? Just even from UK offices.
Yes,
we trained it a little bit. All right, so that's one of the things for tomorrow is deploying infrastructure agent. Infrastructure is our new, basically, product for system monitoring. So automatically instruments the host OS. So that's not dissimilar to what servers did, except that it's built for dynamic cloud environments. So by that I mean you deploy an agent. The agent collects things that the hypervisor, say in Amazon, cannot see, memory statistics, disk queuing, things like that. And then once you've integrated your AWS account, it can actually read all the tagging information from that EC2 instance associated with the instance ID, and then we can meld the data together. And it actually, pretty cool, it stores that for 13 months as event data, which is kind of unstructured. Then you can query it using UI or using the New Relic query language from Insights. And you can do things like show me which EC2 availability zones or regions have different performance utilization characteristics. So count the instances in this zone, give me their average CPU usage, things like that. So these things all integrate together. They're rolled into what's called the New Relic Digital Intelligence Platform. That's thanks marketing team for that one. And this is a litany of like new features we've launched in 2017, and we'll have more. The product team will just keep pushing stuff out. So these kind of trainings become more and more important as you guys, I think, invest more with us. We hope to keep being able to do this for you guys. All right, so for those of you just completely unfamiliar with architecture, just quickly overview. So we have data collectors that could go anywhere, basically. These are different agents. You've got microservices, maybe you have some cloud environments, non-cloud environments. Since New Relic is completely SaaS-based, so we run in the cloud, we have our own actual data center that we run, and so we can collect data from anywhere. You've got users in mobile applications and web apps, and we even have like synthetic robots too. And we can collect data from all of those, even the backend databases. I already talked through most of this, but just so you understand, the very base tenets of our cloud platform are that it's a completely scalable SaaS multi-tenant architecture. So why do you even care about that? You can deploy, say, 1,000 agents of New Relic, and they'll connect to us and start sending data, and New Relic service would probably not really notice. Compare with something that maybe you have to stand up like I don't know, like a collect D instance, it goes to Grafana, you start throwing tons of metrics at it, and if you didn't account for scaling it, or you didn't have the database size correctly, you might run out of space or something like that. So our service is designed to just be automatically scalable with your business. If you guys want to go bigger, we're collecting, let's see, I think the metric is 2.5 billion events per minute. And that just keeps going up and up. So 15,000 customers connecting with some of them tens of thousands of agents per customer. So we're able to take the traffic basically. I think the internal spines are like 300 gigabits per second of input into our Kafka buckets. Kafka stream processing is the technology that Tyler's been going. Secure by default, that's also important. So a lot of times customers are concerned that they're connecting a SaaS service to their business applications or to their end users. And in New Relic land, we know we're operating a SaaS service that might connect to your end users. So we do not collect any private information by default. All data is sanitized. There's no, say, public IP addresses captured or anything like that. City, state, country code would be something we would deserialize from an end user session, and that would not be considered PII in most cases. All right, you got the gist of this. So customer experience applications on the left, APM in the middle, infrastructure for cloud and hybrid environments on the right, and then all of the data that we collect goes into Insights now. So this is an important point. If you're, say, wanting to get a fine-grained metric out of a specific cohort of the application data we collect, you do it in Insights. If you want to do the same for mobile, browser, or synthetic data, those tools store their data for, let's see, they have different retention periods. You know the specifics of it, I guess. Cool. And then, obviously, there's universal dashboarding too in Insights. So we'll actually go into this in the lab today. We'll create what's called a custom dashboard using the pin charts to insights feature. And so that will let you actually pin any chart in UI into the insights dashboard. Insights dashboards could also have analytics query stream. The same tenets apply to alerts. So in the alerting part of the platform, we're actually decoupling all of the products data streams, and we have a product agnostic alert infrastructure. So you can say set an alert on a metric in browser, or set an alert on a query against synthetics data that says alert me if my response time on a web user experience is over 5 seconds, and or alert me if more than 2 of my synthetics locations have that same response time characteristic. And that's all just done in one place. All right. So, any questions here? Super basic, yeah. So, just to level set how APM works specifically, for those of you who are not familiar, we've got a little architecture diagram here, simplified. And the bottom is your app. So, BIM 360 docs or something. And that has a New Relic agent on it. Top is us. And the left is an end user that might be monitoring. We might monitor their session with some of the end user experience products like mobile, their mobile app there, or browser. And then on the right is you. So you connect to us. We store the data, ingest it, summarize it. Actually, the agents do some summarization. We do a lot of the processing, actually. And so those are lightweight payloads sent to us. There are some cases as well where, say you install the APM agent, and the APM agent would automatically inject the browser JavaScript, for example. That works in most languages, Ruby.NET, PHP, depending on what kind of web server technology you're using. So your app could be anything from, oh, my Gopher got cut off. I had to update this. The Gopher is new. So we support Golang.NET, Java, Node.js, PHP, Python applications, Ruby, you name it. I think, actually, we also have a C agent SDK. So if you write C++ code, we can actually allow you to decorate the C++ code, annotate it for transactions, then you compile the SDK into it, and we'll connect to New Relic and send metrics out of it. They send data to us, like I said. You access New Relic in client, in a web UI, or in your mobile app. Have any of you used our mobile app? You should definitely download it.
Yeah.
It's super easy to download, and just connect it to your account. Let me just quickly. There's 2 apps actually if you search New Relic in the App Store. There is a New Relic mobile app and a New Relic Insights app. The mobile app lets you do push notifications and things like that. It lets you look at data. So you're like, got my alert, I can see this. That's super. So right, but you got like alert data here. You got things like APM transaction data. So I've got like my demo account in here. You can see like my services that are alerting at the top and things like that. So definitely you can download that. It's saved me like a ton of hours not sleeping, where I would have been having to get up out of bed at night, respond to an alert, and go log in VPN into my services, top or whatever, and then just get an alert and roll out of bed and check it on my phone. Cool. So I promise we'll get to the labs eventually. We just have to get the base code in here. So basic concept that is very, very, very important to understand about New Relic. This is the math equation that basically powers the APM agent. And New Relic seems like set it up and forget about it. But there's some subtle nuances about Apdex that I don't think most people understand, even people that have been using New Relic for a while. So this is good to understand. This equation, it's in our documentation page. It's used in other APM tools as well. Net, we obviously are able to instrument all the requests in an application from like an HTTP GET or POST or what have you. And as the request moves through the stack here, we're able to identify which bucket of SLA it sort of falls into. And that's done by filtering the transactions based on their response time threshold that you have set for that app. So that can be set for each application you deploy. And it has a default value for most apps of 500 milliseconds. So if we say, let's see, if we say have 1,000 plus transactions that are under 500 milliseconds, your Apdex score is essentially 1. The ratio below is satisfied requests plus tolerating requests divided by 2. Those are anything that is over the response time threshold that you set, but not more than 4 times the response time threshold. Those are counted as frustrating, and they actually aren't accounted for. And then you divide that by the number of requests. So this is essentially a ratio of the satisfactory response times to the unsatisfactory response times, and they're weighted out differently depending on how bad the experience is. Our frustrated experiences also include error transactions. So that's a subtle nuance. So if you have a high spike in errors in the application, those would all be frustrating transactions, like 400 errors and 500 errors in inner exceptions that you did not, you don't have like a catch for that exception. If it's unhandled, we will actually track it as a frustrating transaction. This is sort of the breakdown of how we instrument the transaction, filter it, and then put it in an appropriate bucket. And just knock it around. So let's say you assign an Apdex threshold of half a second here, and you have a transaction that's 1.2 seconds, and let's say you have 2 of those. So those are 2 tolerating requests, and there's no satisfying request because our threshold will be 0.5. And divide those by 2, 1 divided by the number of requests, which is 2, and you would get 0.5 as your Apdex score. So it's a perfect scoring system weighted on the number of transactions. And I go through that example. Yes?
Can you draw the number?
We're gonna do a practice too. Yeah, sure. So let's say we have again. And let's say there's a lot of those. 100. That's what it would show up as in the UI, right? Half a second. So get home twice, you observed it, and both 0.2 or 1.2. So we had 0 satisfying, right? Because anything satisfying would be below this response time threshold. And then TF would be 2 seconds. That's 4x. So divided by, we have 2 requests that are weighted for half over 2. So that's like 1/2. And then, does that make sense? That's 0.5 Apdex. And then we can go through an example too. I have a little training essay there. So next thing is a lab. We're actually going to try and do an Apdex calculation. So this is you can open your laptops. This is a web page that's publicly available. Should be, actually. I hope so. Does anybody else get weak on the security tip? Did it not go?
Follow the security trail.
I think the page has something
Oh no, gotcha.
security issues.
Dang, okay.
Fishing side.
Yeah, that's part of the training. It's eating our cookies.
I was not this.
It could be that we've just all gone to at the same time.
I've had that happen before. Yeah, that one. Alright, well, we can walk through this example. The cool thing about that tool, if you do it at Elm or whatever, it basically generates custom ones for each person in their session. Can I see the error too? Let's see. I wonder if that's just you guys.
Yeah.
Can try to write instead before.
Yeah, interesting. Can someone just send me that? You mind? Okay. I'll have to update this somehow. I wonder if the training team knows that. Probably not. Cool. So basically what this did was, in a 1 minute time, it generated 10 response times for us, right? So who's got the answer already? The idea is, given a threshold that you define, say it's what is the Apdex score?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Correct. 6 satisfied.
Seven,
4
right.
frustrated. So it's like 7 divided by
7 ועוד 3
10. 0.7.
So we got 3 buckets.
85%.
Satisfied?
85. Yeah.
Satisfying is below the threshold.
Yeah, we have 6 of those.
Tolerating is above. And then frustrating is
So we have the for tolerating
0.875.
I'll give this a try. It's okay, it's okay.
מתי הייתי? הנה, שמונה. לא, actually, 85
It was close, you were close.
הוא ממש
So we can actually see how this bucketed out all the response times here.
לא, אבל זה אף פעם לא ידעתי.
Okay.
There were 7.
Yeah. It's hard to get. It's kind of hard to get your around. So let's actually look at that. So for our class, we're actually looking at this the BIM 360 DM product for some investigation. And we're actually looking at a very specific of the.
בין שנייה לארבע זה כאילו אתה מוכן לצפות את זה.
But we can do this equation again. So here's C. If I zoom in here, I think actually this Apdex has never been configured, but it's close to it. So this is how it actually buckets out all the different transactions. So these are time slices. Time slices are 1 minute points in time. So as you hover over any of the metrics in the overview charts in New Relic, you're presented with slices of all the different metrics. If you're at, actually, I should probably go, if you're at an hour or less time though, I was actually going to do math based on long time of rooms. So if you're in I was in a 12-hour view there. In a 12-hour view, you're actually looking at average metrics. So they're probably crunched down to 5, 10, 30 minutes. So here, if I hover over this point in the response time graph, I'm looking at a 1 minute time slice because I have the time maker set to 1 hour. Once you scale out, we'll average the metrics out. So if you want to look at fine-grained metrics, you need to use a time window that's less than an hour.
אתה יודע? הוא בכלל באקאונט לא פרודקשן הזה. פרודקשן של
Okay. So here,
לאף אחד נקשן בקשר עם זה.
we've got end user Apdex score, which is for the browser, and the app server response time. We're only going to look at the app server response time for this case. So you can see that in this 1 minute time period, this is how this really works in the wild, right? We had 1,100 and 15 samples that the agent saw. And in New Relic, we measure every single transaction we can see. And based on our Apdex threshold of 0.5 here, we've got a satisfied percentage of 90. There's 999 of those. And then anything over that threshold was tolerating. We had 61 of those and 55 frustrating transactions. So our math comes out to 0.92. And again, if we had every single transaction satisfied, then we'd be at a 1. You'd have a perfect score of 1. All transactions are good.
But it all will be 101%.
Is it? It is. I wonder why that is. That's a good catch. That one's right. Huh. I'm saving that. That's great. All right. I see. All right, cool. That's great. That's a good catch. All right, so moving on from Apdex. That's the practice for that. Really good. I guess we'll have to move that website. So the next thing we're going to do is actually look at one of the apps, back to the M360 VM app, and we're actually going to try and choose an Apdex threshold that's more appropriate for it. So this is aside from when you deploy the agent and set the application name, this is the one thing that we ask you to configure in the Relic. After you deploy your app and you have metrics, go back and look at the metrics. Metrics would give you response time thresholds that let you set a decent Apdex threshold, and you should use the data that's there. So if you set it too low, you're going to get, it's one of our core alerting mechanisms, right? You're going to get a lot of false positives for your service, or it's going to look like it has a poor Apdex score, bad end user experience all the time. If you set the Apdex threshold way too high, you're going to miss things. So in the case of the M360 VM prod service, I would say that is probably set a little bit too high for the actual response times that the service are. And I'll go into some of my reasoning behind that. The ideal setting for an Apdex threshold is something that is close to the average response time for transactions. So when the service is performing normally, it should have a decent average response time that is fairly consistent. So you should set the Apdex close to that average response time. And you can review the data however you want. You can look at the different peaks and valleys and trends. My personal preference is to look at a day, and then actually in UI, we'll show you what a day does. So if I look at 4 hours, this upper right-hand corner of UI is actually calculating the average. So more recently, the service has performed better. And so today, its average response time is 127 milliseconds. So that's my general guidance. So given that, if you guys want to go in and actually look at the M360 VM service, go ahead and actually record your own what you think it should be, and then I'll ask you guys to give me your answers.
Everyone here are using a different BIM 360 product accounts.
Okay.
So it will be the
We have Pro Tel Aviv account separated from the shared account for BIM.
Interesting.
For our service.
so they can use and see their services.
Got it. Okay. So there's how many accounts are there? There's like 3, right?
No, there's like hundreds in Autodesk.
Whoa. There's not.
There's Field, BIM 360, then there's the old Autodesk accounts, and then there's the Television account.
And the AutoCADs.
So if you have access to BIM 360, let's use that service. If you don't have access to that, use any of the service, like any service.
Are you admin there, Steven?
Oh, the Bin 360 account? Possibly.
I think your services are in there. So.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm an admin though.
Why do we need a separate
Well, you don't
account?
need an admin to do this.
Why do we need a
No, I was going to add that.
dedicated one for Tel Aviv?
What's up?
It's in the
People.
to-do list.
Is it principle for us to use the same account? We will do the lab on the same application. Is principle?
This is something we're working with the architecture team on. I'll say that. It's not an easy task to just reorganize all the accounts because you need to communicate and things like that. We're moving towards a more consistent account model, and there'll probably be less accounts in the future.
Fine-grained user. No, I meant the lab.
Oh.
Right now. The lab you can pick any.
Yeah, pick if you don't have access to BIM 360, the account I was talking about, go and look at one of the services you have in your account.
BIM 360 TLV.
Yeah.
Prep-run.
Yeah, you can pick anything.
I've got access to all the Autodesk accounts, and we've got 51.
Yeah, that's about right. Not hundreds. 50. So some of them are dead. Some of them are empty.
They used to open one account per service.
Sorry?
They used to open one account per service.
Yeah. Now, most of them are in the A360 or the BIM 360 accounts. Like 90% of services or something like that are in there.
And then WhipDM's got it settled.
Yeah. I mean, Stephen, I'd be curious to talk to you later about how that came to be, if you know, but yours like, I don't know.
Can you set throughput per transaction? If we have an API request that takes much longer than the other, setting the same value.
This is why this is important. So this is setting the Apdex for the app.
Alright, and for a
Later on.
specific transaction, can they have different ones?
We'll get to that. Yes.
Yes.
I'll explain how it actually changes things too.
Another question in the meantime.
Sure.
Do you have or plans to add anomaly monitoring like Datadog has?
We have baseline and things like that. I'll be covering some of that tomorrow if you want.
Yeah, I would want to know about that. I would like to be monitored by the system if something is out of order instead of me
Yeah. Have you
getting
seen?
alerts and dashboards.
I think actually most advanced like SRE organizations I work with believe that they don't want an anomaly detection to tell them what's wrong because they want someone to know what their service is doing, live in the data, right? And actually,
That's for us to consider. Do
Sure.
you guys have that option?
we have baselines with automatic seasonality detection now. That's been GA for months, I think. And on the horizon, we have more of a AI tool that's going to be launched this year. It's called Radar. And it automatically looks at all the metrics data in your system and presents you with cards about anomalies, M+1 query types.
Can you do transaction monitoring between services? So if you've got multiple services, can you tag it with an ID and then monitor it through those services? So we've got API requests that actually go through multiple stacks of software.
Yeah.
So is there any way in your software to monitor it end to end throughout all the services?
Yeah, we do some of that tracing out of the box. I'll show you this in this training as well. Alright, so everyone's looked at their service.
רובם שם כבר.
I guess, how many of you actually got to look at BIM 360 DM?
דרך אגב, זה לא משנה אם זה פרוד או פרי-פרוד, בעיקר שיש לך איזה אפליקיישן להיכנס אליו.
צריכים שיהיה להם הכל בלי קשר.
בלי קשר, רובם שם דרך אגב. 80% שם.
Is that in the Tel Aviv?
הכל בסדר, בסדר. הכל צרחה.
ביקשתי ממנו בעבר שיש...
Which app server? Great guess.
חוץ מהאנשים החדשים שהצטרפו לחברה, ואני שמתי את כולם.
Prod app server.
בוא נעבור לך. אתה מלמעלה למלמטה. אתה בסליק אני באקאונט.
I think it's in different pattern.
No, it's D360
Got it. So this is something we're supposed to bring up about last year, is what to do with your events, reorganize them. Yeah. Cool. So it's a small service, pretty consistent response times. This is any actual activity? Yeah. It's not launched. Which software issues?
זה לא... אוי, מה זה אישוס הזה? אישוס בלעדי. החדש לא בשירות, נכון?
Well, so this guy's way too low, right?
This is the future of Beam360 issues service.
This is not in use yet.
It's not in production.
Got it.
You can pick another one.
Maybe
You have like
workflows?
You have QA.
You can take workflows or
Broad workflows.
prod workflows.
Okay. If you're looking at issues, look at workflow. Do you not have access to the main accounts?
They should have.
I wrote to everyone, if you need access to the prod account, comment on my message on the DevOps channel, look at your Slack, you all mentioned.
This is a Python service. So for everything but Node services, the default is half a second, which is what this is for now. That services tend to just be more synchronous, a lot faster, so that's the default. So what should this guy be set at? What do you think? It's currently a 2 second, or sorry, half a second.
A second. 0.05.
Yeah, half a second, or half a, sorry, 50 milliseconds?
50 milliseconds, I think, yeah.
I would say that's pretty close. So one way, so you can check, look at your 7-day rolling average for the service, and then
I think a little more.
go look at a day, because these are averages, so it's going to smooth some things out. So sometimes you get spikes to 100, and in this case, it looks like there's even some calls that are super slow. Or
If you can
maybe
track
are-
down the specific function, then probably the developer is sitting here.
It's not a function, it's too many API calls, docs with ACL.
Docs DevOps is
the
also
other service
HQ.
down there.
Docs DevOps, please raise your hand.
Cool. Yeah, I would say even though the peaks there's some for 100 milliseconds, the average still stays around 50, even for a day.
But you would put 50 or 60, 70?
It's up to you, actually. Do you want to be more sensitive, 50 milliseconds? Like some of these spikes are sustained over 100, so you might even want to only do 100 on this. But it doesn't hurt to try setting in something and seeing if it goes too low.
Depends on your alert.
But deciding, the decision should be made based on business logic, right?
And you can alert.
There are some general guidelines to what a good Apdex is and what a bad Apdex is. This is the resultant score. So obviously one is everything is hunky-dory, it's awesome. The fact that this service never goes below 0.9 is
Bad.
not good. Yeah, it means it's not configured correctly. Anything from 0.8 to 0.9, like 0.85 to 0.89, 0.9 or so is probably good. That health service is healthy, it's operating normally. Roughly 98% of the transactions are performing well. If you get into the 0.7 and lower band, 0.6, you should probably be throwing an alert there. That's like 60-70% of your transactions are failing or are having a poor response time. So that's the concept behind Apdex is supposed to give you a consistent scoring model. So you can say, we can go across all the services inside of Autodesk and set a custom notification channel based on the same threshold for Apdex. And then we can feed, say, one of the things we're working with architecture guys on is feeding the cloud sock with events when there's an issue that warrants some sort of action or is impacting users enough to be recorded into like ServiceNow or something like that. We don't have any of that rolled out yet, but it's sort of stuff we're discussing. All right, cool. So that's your Apdex proposal. Any questions about that? Do we sort of explain what highs and lows troughs should be generally? Cool. Yeah, like I said, this is something, things that like even people that I think have been using Relic for a long time don't necessarily. Okay. All right, next topic. So Apdex is the core metric that determines actually how we alert and also how we collect certain other information. So that's why it's important to set the Apdex correctly. Retention-wise, we're storing metrics in New Relic for 90 days. The fine-grained metrics and events get stored for a week alongside traces. Those are your database or transaction and database traces. So for very slow calls, individual records of slow calls, we get a long trace for that. Then those are kept for 7 days. Throughput of transactions, things like that, the summarized metrics, those are stored for 90 days at, again, 1 minute granularity, and then they get averaged into hourly averages after that. So if you want to you can look at 90 days rolling average window for New Relic, but beyond the 7-day window, you're going to be looking at average data. So deep down sampling. And so where Apdex ties in is in the transaction traces, we don't take traces for fast transactions. So the agent's watching all transactions, and if the agent sees a transaction that's in the frustrating bucket for your Apdex score, which depending on your Apdex threshold, then it will take a trace of it. Or more accurately, it will keep the trace. It traces all of them. So if they're fast, it starts tracing it. If it exceeds, if it finishes before it exceeds any of the thresholds for Apdex, it will just throw it away. And all the agents work the same across all the different languages. They start tracing. So if you have your Apdex set to seconds, and your service is going 10 milliseconds, you won't ever see any traces. To your point about outliers, right? Those are the outliers. We're using some statistical algorithms inside the actual agent to catch, if you put like say a response time on Instagram here for this service, which you can do really well. Right? You want to catch, that's a terrible view. The entire concept of New Relic is this, right? These requests on the left, they're very fast, right? Bucket this out into Instagram. We don't need to optimize those, probably. Unless they're error transactions. On the far right, these are the opportunities to optimize the application. These are the low-hanging fruit of things that have N+1 query patterns or slow external service calls to other services. So that's where Apdex is good. It lets you point to those outlier transactions and trace them. Errors are also events stored for 7 days. All right, so quick UI overview really here. This is actually one of the New Relic's internal services for synthetics, but just for training purposes. So in this is an example of overview chart, and it's telling you where time is spent in the breakdown of the request. So as we time the requests, where the web service calls are spending time, they're spending time in the application code, which is Python, in a lot of your cases with Java here, or it's spending time in the database layer. And in this example, most of the time it's being spent in external service calls. And so you can actually click through on the UI, and you can actually drill down into those external service calls. So we were asking about tracing earlier, Stephen. Have you seen this? Where you can actually click on the external file. So these are all the endpoints that the service.
Yeah, I just wondered if you've got service monitoring set up on those, then you can click on there and it'll take you to the one inside the other service.
Yeah.
If it's on the same account.
If it's on the same account.
That's part of the
no.
reason why we're reorganizing the accounts too.
That's the feature.
This is an artificial barrier that was created a long time ago within New Relic, and we have an ongoing project to remove this account barrier completely. It's actually about the GA. You guys can look at the beta if you want. I opted you guys in. I just didn't find anybody to participate, but if you're interested, it's called cross-account service maps. We actually map all the services in the accounts and remove the account barriers. Yeah.
So the account barrier is only relevant for external services or services only?
Sorry, wait.
So what you just mentioned,
Yeah.
the account barrier,
Yeah.
is it relevant to service maps or external services as well?
Both. It's the same. This protocol that we designed, I don't know, 2008, called cross-application tracing. It's our own proprietary header. We add an encoded header. It's a single header. You can actually look at it as X New Relic cat ID. If you inspect the HTTP request coming between the services, the agent and the originating request adds that attribute. It also adds some other sort of path attributes, but it encodes them into a single header. And then as that service passes its call onto the next service, that next agent reads the header. And then when they send up data, they actually correlate in the back end, and then we draw this connection. So this connection is actually connecting the developer API in the 360 from the VM app to its individual transactions on web VM. And you can actually drill down. So if we were spending a lot of time in external, drill down into the storage API call, which is taken up from the Vim VM app, 14% of the total time in the external service calls to that service. All right. A bit off track there, but that helps you guys understand sort of how you would trace through things. So the other place you drill down is transaction dashboard. There's a lot of different data here. So there's screenshots for you. There's web and non-web transactions. Let's go back to the VM app, for example. So by default, all the API controllers and things like that, these are all the actual, in Ruby, we break it out by action, controller action here. So documents controller index is the action. You've got web transaction by default. You also have non-web transactions. So this could be anything like a Java message service queue in Java app. And there's a couple here in this app. So these can actually be alerted onto. We have metrics for all of them. Where you drill down in APM, you notice we're looking at an hour here. On the bottom of this here, we've got traces from that 1 hour window from all the transactions. You can scope down. So remember, our traces are giving you detailed metrics from the code execution path of those really long transactions. The transactions list, and actually all the other lists in UI, sort by most time consuming. So a little confusing initially, but really it's showing you where most time is spent in the application executing code. So we're looking at a 60-minute time window. 33% of that time in non-web transactions is spent doing CSE process job. It's pretty simple. If we're drilling down, these are what are called the component breakdown metrics. And so these are actually linked to the originating transaction. So in this transaction and process job, we've got a bulk of the majority of time servicing this request spent in calling developer.api.autodesk.com via HTTP client. Make sense? I think most of you have seen this. And then where this gets more focused is we've got the traces for that specific transaction here too. So we can filter it down. All right. So traces are from those long calls, like I said. You can drill down from the overview chart into the top 5 slowest ones. You can also actually go directly into a trace from the overview chart. The slowest 3 traces are shown on that one as well. And that will drill you directly into the trace for that time. So like these guys over here, back up here. Now what you notice, we switched to non-web transaction time because we were inspecting jobs on the previous page, and it stayed in that setting. So transaction traces here, we've got 50-second and a 17-second one. So that was before we can actually drill in. We'll drill into the component breakdown for that transaction, and then here's our trace controls. So this is our code path, right? You guys know what transaction traces are? You've looked at them before? Those of you familiar with New Relic, I'm sure. Any questions about how these are collected?
Wait, question about how are these collected? Yeah.
Sure.
How are these collected? What your agent doing inside our servers? How it works?
So I know how the Java one works. You guys know what a tracer object is?
So it basically adds its own like headers or something like the code?
It's actually just following a call stack and recording timers at each segment of code.
And in any language you have access to the stacks?
Yeah, in Java it's bytecode instrumentation. So there's 2 types of instrumentation in Java. Obviously Java. That's the one I know the best. So when your JVM starts, there's a jar file, that's the agent. It's loaded into the profiling Java agent argument of the JVM. So you start your Tomcat app, and the application loads that agent. The agent actually inspects the classes and methods that the JVM loads into dependencies, so it's jars, and it matches using some hashing its instrumentation to those classes and methods. It says I see a signature hash for say this servlet that I know how to instrument, and I match it. Match my instrumentation patterns, and the instrumentation patterns are very, honestly not something crazy complicated, but getting to match up automatically out of the box is the sort of magic of New Relic. So let's say this is our entry point. That adds a timer at the surface level, so every request for that entry point for that API gets timed. We can generate like these lists of transactions dynamically too. Depends on the language and framework and things like that. So once those are in place, then for all the requests we fire like a trace which follows a stack completely. That's more of a heavy operation, right? Just gathering transaction surface level metrics is sort of a low latency event. We can do that all the time. That's where we get most of the metrics. For the transaction traces, we fire the tracer and then kill it if it is one of those faster transactions. And then if we want to keep it in memory and aggregate it and send it to New Relic, actually we don't aggregate traces. There's a weighting algorithm that determines how many to collect. Depends on throughput and a variety of other factors, your Apdex score. Then we'll actually pull that trace out, save it if it meets the same criteria, and then send it up. And it's like a JSON code, basically.
How intrusive those in my code? Are they like affecting the execution?
Yeah, it shouldn't. I mean, there's like an average overhead target, mostly CPU and a bit of memory is required to run it. The Ruby agent will do a lot of crazy stuff on all its own. Pretty low latency, like 50 nanoseconds or something like that per trace. These are all tested in development and QA. So if we release framework support for the newest version of Rails, they rigorously test it against sort of QA applications, measure the latency patterns. I would say that just generally instrumenting applications can be super costly if you have like very like high millions and millions of transactions, or at the very low scale. Most applications though fall somewhere in between, and it's pretty much safe to instrument them unless they have no overhead whatsoever. So it depends. We advise people to test that with the instrumentation, and then you generally will see an impact like right away. If there's a problem, like fast transformer conflicts or something like that, there's edge cases always, but we generally aim to have a low overhead footprint. Most frameworks. We instrument all the common ones.
Thanks.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
There are times that stack traces are missed, and it cannot provide them. It is asking us to do a dump or profiling.
This drill down right here.
Yeah, this drill down on the stack trace with the data I had from the code. The full trace.
Yeah. I'm trying to decide how much I really want to do there. It depends. It's not consistent in the way it decides to capture something. Sometimes they get dropped or they're not collected. There's not enough time.
So we do what we can.
What's that?
We use only what we can. Many times the important ones you want are not there. The one with the errors or error trace or transaction trace, then you cannot have them.
You should. So if you tune your Apdex, then you should have
okay.
You should have more important traces surfacing on top.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe that's something that, sorry Joe, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm thinking maybe that's something we can, when the lab session comes or whatever, we can try that and like confirm.
So the second part of this, the Apdex configuration, is the key transactions part. Okay, so this is completely undocumented. It's not really undocumented, but most people have never heard this before. So you can do key transactions, which is like tagging, like our get home action, which is super important entry point to the application, and that creates a separate transaction record in New Relic, and it actually tracks it differently than all the other transactions with regards to transaction tracing and Apdex scoring. So if you saw in the UI where I was looking at the track as key transaction button, this is actually the DM app. The screenshot is from earlier today. You can add a key transaction if you drill into a transaction. And then you can also add a key transaction by inspecting all the applications in the account, and you do this from the key transactions page. So where this comes into play with regards to the Apdex score and tracing is if you set a custom Apdex score for a key transaction, we will actually treat that transaction's scoring differently based on that custom Apdex score. So you guys remember we had issues or workflow? So web transactions, workflow. And we had the workflow submittal, that's 6 seconds on average. So we can never get to an acceptable Apdex score for, say, 5 seconds and the average response time. But what we do is we set the average Apdex score for the entire application, and then we fine-grain tune the Apdex score on an individual transaction basis. So if we actually drop into this guy, and it is a key transaction already. Sorry. we see its Apdex T value. I'll put something for this. It's at 6 seconds. This actually rolls the Apdex score up into the main Apdex score. So every time we do workflow submittals, this item view set create, and we observe the transaction going however long it goes, it will score this against this Apdex T value for this individual transaction and roll that up into the main Apdex. So this is one thing that you should do for all the super slow transactions. So after you set your Apdex value for the overall app, go configure key transactions for the transactions that really won't fit that pattern. And you always have one or two, right? You have maybe a health check page or something that's hyper fast. This is easy, low latency gets that are even faster than the average response time. And then you probably got something that's slower than average as well. So those are the sort of upper and lower bound. You should go configure some of the custom transactions. So there's no key transactions in here. Go make some key transactions. We're going to actually do this. Go back into whatever account you've got. And there's only so many transactions in the account. So you can make, it's not going to affect anything to make a key transaction. It's a server-side configuration thing. The agent will pull it and actually remember it during its next harvest cycle, which is every 1 minute. And then it will inform it how many more traces to take of that next time, but shouldn't cause any additional overrun or anything like that. So if you go into 360 account, if you have it, or go into the service you're closely oriented with that you own or worked on. I have been 360 PM.
You can also work on the browser.
There are 2 Apdex settings, yes. One for end user, one for app.
With APM, let me configure both of the. Oh. You configure both of the.
It's configured based on the APM.
That's actually if you press here.
That's what
see that you have both of them.
So you can do it from the key transactions page too. You can go add more here.
So I need to set my Apdex score approximately the transaction.
Close to the average.
So if my transaction is about 7 seconds, my Apdex score should be about 8.
Yeah.
זה שהכי צריך.
That's way too high. Some just 1.1 seconds.
כל מי שזה בדיחה.
That's way too high. So really,
אין לנו פרודקשן.
change that to.
קיצור אין לנו פרודקשן. איש הזמן ריקוס פעמים. וורקלוז, 25 ריקוס פעמים, נכון שזה חלק ככה שלי זה...
Probably 1.2.
גם לפני סבבה. גם לא אף משהו. אבל יותר,
אוי, מה אתה?
Oh, you
חברה חיה, הכל בונים, לא משתמשים בזה.
So 1.2.
לא, נגיע לזה של האלנטים, נמצא אותי אחרי שהוא יסביר. לא, הוא יסביר את הכל בפירוט. בינתיים תעשה פיינצ'ור לאפטקסים וזה. כשיהיה לך אבדיק נכון, אז מספיק כשיהיה לך. קודם כל צריך כל שביעה בנפרד לעשות את זה, אני יכול להגביר את זה. נכון, זה להגביר את זה בעצמי. אתה כל הזמן להקים מוזיק חדשים. כשיהיה לך אבטקס טוב, תגיד מורכב בעלות, תגיד אבטקס עולה 0.9 עד 0.9 עד 0.8 זה לא פחות ב-0.8 או 0.7 תן לי עלי עוד סטור משהו.
זה חצי שנה.
חצי שנה זה לא לחתור, ואז אם שאתה מדבר, אתה גם בנושא הפיינצ'ון, ואז אתה עושה את
That's kind of exceptional.
שזה כל שפייתון שאנחנו קנפגים דרך השסקות. אתה עובד איתנו, יושבים ביחד עובדים, עושים סייף שלהם, אתה יהיה לך אפליקציה פתצה. פחות או יותר פה אתה תקבל את הסיטה עם כל היכולות ומה אתה רוצה ואתה תבין בדיוק איך נתת את האפליקציה שלך זכוכית מגדלת מה אתה רוצה יש לך 19 ריקוס פעמים כולל אפצ'ק או לא כולל אפצ'ק? זה אפצ'ק שלך? Watch me use that with Apdex? כן. תסתכל, בערך יש 28 ריקווסט פר-מינית, תראה 97% Apdex.
למי?
אז לכן. זה לא רב הטרנזקציה? אני אצלכם, זה אמר לנו את זה לא מצא. אתה עושים? אתה עושה את זה 6 שניות. מה אתה אומר לי כאן? שאתה עושה את זה או לא? אני לא לא, צריך לעשות שאם זה עובר
קשר קצר בין רגע זה קשר
Storage being truthful, but yeah, we're all cooking.
I can remove it, but you can't hold it.
לא, אחי, זה לא... יש לך גם ככה מלא טג דף שאתה צריך להגיע אליו.
Yeah, because I have. Yeah, I thought I was on there. Did you add that one? Did someone else add one?
אבל אם זה הדסק, עד שזה נהיה מוכן,
Is that your service?
כן. אז זה הולך למרות
LGS. לגמרי, כמה עובדה שיש לא משנה, זה יגנור על Apdex. נכון,
אתה יכול לראות,
יש לך שאתה יכול להתעלם
That's the thing, right? Like, for sure.
או זה כזה
Yeah, it's a big deal. Yeah.
אתה לא צריך לצאת לגנור בפייתון, נכון? לגנור בפייתון, הצלחת לעשות את זה? הצלחת או לא?
זה צריך לעשות.
זה בקוד.
Nice thing.
Actually, it would be better.
Oh, could it? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's better than Oakland. It's cold in San Francisco right now.
Really?
Yeah, it's raining when I left.
You can like 24 just, like pick the dates, 90%, there's no, right?
Yeah.
You can
מגדירים את ה-key transactions.
Well, all days.
Well said. I hope you're right.
All right, everyone make a key transaction and screw it up pretty good. Like I said, there's only so many transactions to add. Any questions? Key transactions? Mobile Apdex? They control tracing for their own settings. The fact that you set the key transaction in Apdex, it's documented, but I think it's not well understood. But it's actually really helpful. I mean, the obvious use case for a key transaction is it's a critical transaction to the app. And you need to alert on the settings. So it can have its own metrics, it can have its own error rate, response time, Apdex.
Also, if you have, like you said, if you have transactions that are not really correlated to the rest of the transactions, like they're really above or below the average.
The outlier, yeah, their average is also much higher. Like applications that do long haul batch processing or something like that, those are good apps. Good transactions, a lot of great transactions. Usually something you do first set up the service.
כן. יש להם אבל זה לא
the days of monoliths are also kind of gone. You guys are making smaller and smaller needs-based services, right?
Yeah, there's like, as I said, microservices, but the problem is that from the website, then you're all of a sudden working with a lot of services, and then web APIs can be very error and response rates.
Yeah. so you should have all created a key transaction and seen what that experience is like. In fact, he can't remove his, but that's because he's a user. When I check your account next week, I hope there's more transactions that are part of this key transactions than there were today. All right, so we have about another hour before lunch as well, so we're gonna go till 12:30 here. I'm just gonna go straight through since it's like a 2-hour block. The next thing is Air Analytics. So we've covered all the transaction tracking. We covered like all the response time metrics and things like that. There's 2 areas of concern in APM, right? There's response time, throughput, things like that, and then there's where are my exceptions? What's happening with my app? So the Air Analytics page lets you do things like it lets you analyze the errors that are being reported by the agent in your application. Again, an error is anything that's an unhandled exception. So if you're rigorously handling all of your exceptions to log or something like that, New Relic's agents won't see those by default. You can use an API called Notice Error to send those to us. Just be careful that you don't send us more errors than you have transactions because your Apdex will equal that. There are ways you can do it though. But usually this is more useful for like anything you weren't accounting for, right? If you're logging it out, you don't want to see that you're logging it as content. So you can actually use, this is actually the revamp of the old errors page. Errors page used to be pretty static. This one uses insights. So you notice the chart looks slightly different. This is actually the DMF again. These are some of its error patterns. Oh no, that's your. So error rate's also one of the alerting metrics that you can alert on separately. So what you get in Air Analytics is 2 independently passable charts that break the errors out by different attributes. So back to DM. So in DM we have pretty consistent error rate. Below 1%. And we can see sometimes it spikes up to 1-2%, something like that. And our default grouping in Air Analytics is by class. You can group by any arbitrary attribute. So this is kind of your first intro into Insights. Insights is event-driven. So when you have an exception, you put an event in the error transaction error table. The attributes are the different columns of the table, essentially. So error class is one column. The message is another column. Invalid template error. We also have request headers and things like that. And then you notice in the middle here we have custom attributes. So some of these are internal. New Relic transaction GUID is something that we use to do correlation in the back end. I'm an admin, so I can see that. Response headers, content type is something that's specific to this agent. It's capturing its custom attributes. Host headers, so where the request came from, the upstream. So this is the URL, generally where the request originated from. If you have multiple different refers, it might be useful to look at the refer URL. So documents page, documents detail page. If you have a specific page, it's throwing more errors than the other. And so what we can do in the analytics pages, we also have the same pages inside of the browser. There's a single page applications route and page view table. I was showing Nib earlier before I flew out here. And it lets you filter. So I want to look at the errors for only documents detail refer. Let me see if they're occurring on any one specific host, right? It's filter and then facet. And these are all our instance IDs. So no specific host has one error or the other. This is kind of useful. We're going to go look at our errors, see where they're coming from. Once we drill in a specific set of errors that we want to actually look at, let's do this no method error. We get the error trace. So all the stack trace details,